Hello there, my friends. It's good to have you here tonight. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it where you are right now? I always find it fascinating, imagining people in faraway places, lying in bed or resting somewhere quiet, listening to stories that began thousands of years ago. Because tonight, I want to tell you about something that still breathes beneath our feet: the old roads of Rome. They are older than kingdoms, older than the languages we speak. Some of them still exist, buried under highways, cutting through forests, or vanishing into lonely hills where no traveler walks anymore. But they were once alive. They carried soldiers, merchants, lovers, emperors, and ordinary men like me. My name is Marcus Flavius, and long ago I built roads for the Roman Empire. Now, in the last years of my life, I sit by the remains of one, half covered in moss, half swallowed by time, and I remember. The stones are cold, but they still hum with the footsteps of centuries. When I press my hand against them, I can almost feel the weight of the carts, the marching of legions, the rhythm of life that once pulsed here. When I was a boy, I didn't understand why my father spent his life digging, cutting, and laying stone under the burning sun. I thought roads were just dirt. But one day, when I was 10 years old, he took me to the construction of a great road, the Via Appia, the Queen of Roads. I still remember the sound. Hundreds of men working in rhythm. Hammers striking stone, chisels shaping blocks, and voices calling measurements in Latin. There was dust in the air, white as flour, and heat shimmering over the ground. Yet there was something beautiful about it, something that felt eternal. An old engineer, whose name I've long forgotten, noticed me staring. He laughed, his face covered in gray dust, and said, "Boy, these roads will outlive your grandchildren. They will still stand when Rome itself forgets our names." At that moment, I didn't believe him. I thought he was exaggerating, like the old men in taverns who claim they've seen gods walking among mortals. But now, as an old man myself, I know he was right. The roads of Rome were not just paths. They were veins. They carried the lifeblood of the empire. Soldiers marching to war, traders bringing spices from the east, messengers carrying the words of emperors faster than the wind. Without them, Rome would have been nothing but scattered stones and ambitions. With them, it became eternal. But eternity, my friends, does not come easily. Every stone beneath your feet hides a secret, sweat, sacrifice, and precision beyond belief. I remember my first lesson when I joined the Corps of Engineers. Our teacher, an old centurion with scars deeper than wrinkles, said, "A Roman road must be so straight that even the gods can follow it without losing their way." We didn't understand what he meant then, but later, when I held the measuring tools, the groma and the chorobates, and looked at miles of untouched land ahead, I realized the meaning. We were not building for ourselves. We were building for time itself. That night, after my first day on site, I couldn't sleep. The stars were bright over the camp, and somewhere, wolves howled in the distance. I looked at the half-finished road stretching into darkness and wondered, how could a line of stone and dust become something that connects worlds? Years later, I would find the answer, but not before seeing roads vanish under floods, stones cracked by frost, and men lost to exhaustion and war. I would see how the empire's hunger for expansion turned engineers like me into soldiers of stone, marching not with swords, but with hammers and chisels. And yet, even now, when the world has changed beyond imagination, the old roads remain. In forests where trees whisper in Latin and ruins crumble into dust, they still lie beneath the earth, straight, silent, and patient. If you ever walk across one and feel a strange firmness under your feet, you'll know. Rome passed there once. So, let me take you back to the beginning, to the days when the earth was still soft, when men believed they could carve eternity from the soil, when the sound of a hammer against stone echoed like a heartbeat through the mountains. That was the sound of Rome being built. One road, one stone, one breath at a time. And I was there to see it begin. When I was 16, I left my mother's home in Latium to follow the men who built the roads. They said it was a hard life, the work of slaves, soldiers, and fools. But when I saw the first rays of sunrise glinting off a new layer of polished stones, I knew I wanted no other life. There was something sacred in it, something that whispered of order in a chaotic world. We were not simply laying rock upon rock. We were shaping the bones of an empire. My teacher's name was Aulus Varro. He was short, broad-shouldered, with a beard the color of iron and eyes that never looked at the horizon, only at the ground, as if measuring the world one step at a time. He spoke little, but when he did, every word carried weight. The land, he told us on our first day, is like a living creature. If you build upon it carelessly, it will swallow your road whole. But if you understand its heartbeat, the earth will hold your stones for eternity. I still remember the first tool I held, a groma, the ancient surveying cross used by Roman engineers. It looked simple. A vertical staff with 4 horizontal arms and plumb lines dangling from each end. But with it, we could measure perfect angles across miles of uneven terrain. We would stand in the blazing sun for hours, aligning strings, sighting poles, adjusting shadows, until our lines were straight as a javelin in flight. It was exhausting work, but it was the beginning of mastery. Each morning began the same way. Before the first hammer struck, we made offerings to the Laras, the household gods of the road. A few drops of wine poured into the soil, a whispered prayer for safe passage. Some laughed at the ritual, but not Aulus. He said that even the gods needed to be reminded that men were still building. And perhaps he was right, for no road was ever blessed by carelessness. Then came the digging. Dozens of men with picks and shovels would carve a long trench into the earth, clearing trees, leveling hills, filling valleys. The smell of fresh soil mixed with sweat and smoke. Slaves sang rhythmic songs to keep time with their labor. At noon, we rested in the shade, eating bread and olives while listening to Aulus talk about gradients and drainage. He said that water was the enemy of every road, that a single puddle could undo a year of work. So we learned how to tilt the surface ever so slightly, letting the rain slide away like tears off marble. But it wasn't only the earth we battled. The sun was merciless, and so was the stone. I remember my hands bleeding, the blisters bursting as I tried to lift the basalt blocks into place. We worked barefoot most days, our feet hardened like the ground itself. At night, when I lay in my tent, I could feel the pulse of the road beneath me, like it was alive, slowly stretching further and further into the unknown. Aulus often spoke of the first great roads, the Via Appia, the Via Flaminia, built long before I was born. He said that when Appius Claudius first ordered the road to Capua, people mocked him. They said it was madness to carve through hills and swamps for hundreds of miles. But he did it, and when the first chariot rolled smoothly from Rome to the southern ports, the laughter stopped. Aulus's eyes would shine when he told that story. He'd look at the horizon and say, "The man who builds a road builds a line across time." There were superstitions among the workers, too. They believed that if a raven flew across the road during construction, it meant the path would endure for centuries. If a snake crossed it, the road would soon crumble. Some men even buried small tokens, coins, rings, or pieces of pottery beneath the first layer of stones for good luck. I did it once secretly, a tiny bronze coin with the image of Mars, the god of strength. I buried it under the road near Terracina. Sometimes I wonder if it's still there, hidden under centuries of dust, holding the road together even now. By the second year, I had learned the rhythm of the work. measure, dig, fill, lay, press, smooth. Every sound became familiar. The crack of stone, the scrape of metal, the low hum of men chanting in unison. The road seemed endless, but each day we pushed forward, leaving behind a smooth line of stone that gleamed like silver in the sun. When we completed a section, Aulus would walk its entire length in silence. Only at the end would he nod once, as if granting the earth permission to rest. Sometimes I think about those early days, how simple everything was, how we thought the roads would never change. But we were wrong. The stones may be strong, but the world above them is fragile. Kingdoms rise and fall. Armies march and vanish. Only the road endures, quiet and patient, carrying the weight of memory. And so began my life as an engineer of Rome, a servant of stone and time. I did not yet know that the roads we built would carry more than soldiers and merchants. They would carry destiny itself. The first great road I ever helped complete was the Via Appia, the one they called Regina Viarum, the Queen of Roads. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can see it. A flawless line of gray stone stretching from Rome all the way to Capua, cutting through hills, forests, and fields like a blade of light. It was more than a road. It was a statement. It told the world that Rome would not stop at her walls, that her reach would extend as far as men could walk and the gods would allow. We began at dawn, when the mist still hugged the valleys outside the city. The air smelled of damp earth and laurel leaves. I was only 19, still new to the work, but already the rhythm of it had carved itself into my bones. Every step, every hammer strike, felt like part of something larger, as if I were helping the earth remember its shape. At that time, Appius Claudius Caecus, the man who gave the road its name, was already blind and old, but his orders reached us like thunder. "Make it straight," he commanded. "Make it worthy of eternity." And so we did. For months we dug and filled and leveled, laying the foundation deeper than any man had thought necessary. People said we were mad, that no road should need such depth. But Aulus Varro, my teacher, would whisper, "A shallow road dies young. A deep road becomes part of the earth itself." The process was a marvel of precision. First came the statumen, large stones laid flat, forming the bones of the road. Then a layer of crushed rock and gravel called rudis. Over that, finer gravel mixed with lime nucleus, we called it, forming a hard, unyielding core. Finally, we placed the great paving stones on top, each one shaped by hand, fitted so tightly that a blade could not pass between them. When rain fell, the water ran off into ditches that lined both sides. Even nature, it seemed, obeyed Roman design. Travelers began to appear long before the road was finished. Merchants from Campania, soldiers returning from service, farmers leading their oxen to market. They would stop, watch us working, and sometimes toss us bread or fruit in admiration. One old woman, I remember, came every week to offer us figs and say, "May your stones never crack." She said her husband had died building the first section of the road, crushed by a falling block, but she still came. She said he lived on through the road itself. That thought stayed with me. Maybe all of us lived on that way, not in memory, but in the stones we left behind. When the Via Appia finally opened, I walked its full length from Rome to Terracina. Took me 5 days. 5 days under the same sun, the same dust, the same endless rhythm of footsteps. But I never tired of looking at it, the perfect symmetry, the way it shone after rain, like polished marble. Along the sides, cypresses cast thin shadows, and milestones stood like silent sentinels, each one carved with the name of the builder and the distance from the city. The first time I saw a legion march down that road, I felt something shift inside me. 10,000 men in armor, moving in perfect unison. Their footsteps sounded like thunder rolling across the plains. Dust rose behind them like smoke. They were not just soldiers, they were Rome itself, advancing one measured step at a time. And beneath their feet lay our work, the veins through which the empire's heart would beat for centuries. At night, when the campfires burned along the roadside, I would sit alone and listen to the sounds of travel, the creak of wagon wheels, the soft murmur of men telling stories, the distant bark of dogs guarding their masters' camps. There was a peace in it, a kind of harmony that made me forget the pain in my hands and the ache in my back. The road felt alive, humming faintly beneath the ground, as if whispering that it would carry Rome's voice farther than any of us could imagine. Years later, when I returned as an old man, the Via Appia was still there. Weeds had grown between the stones, and the ditches were shallow with silt, but the shape of it, that perfect, unwavering line, remained. Carts still rolled over it, their wheels echoing the same rhythm we once heard as builders. Even after centuries, even after the fall of emperors, the road refused to die. Sometimes I wonder if Appius Claudius knew what he had created. Did he understand that his command to make it straight would carve a scar across history? Or that people, long after our bones turned to dust, would still walk upon the same stones and feel the same echo underfoot? Perhaps he did. Perhaps he saw more, even in blindness, than most men ever will. When the moon rose high and silvered the road like a river of light, I would lie on the stones and close my eyes. The warmth of the day still lingered in them, gentle and steady. It felt like resting against the heart of something eternal. And in that quiet, I began to understand what my teacher had meant. The road is alive, and we, its builders, are merely its breath. People often ask, though never out loud, because who now remembers to ask such things, why the roads of Rome survived when empires did not? Why, after earthquakes, floods, wars, and the slow decay of centuries, these ribbons of stone still cut through the earth as if time itself had chosen to spare them? I can tell you why. Because they were not built for comfort or for beauty or even for men. They were built for permanence, as if we were trying to speak to eternity in the only language it understands: patience and stone. Every Roman road began the same way, not with tools but with silence. We would stand at the chosen place before sunrise, the engineers, the soldiers, and the slaves. Aulus Vero would draw a straight line in the dirt with his staff, his face unreadable. Then he would say, "Here begins the road." Sounded simple, but it was a kind of vow. From that moment on, the land belonged to the road, and the road belonged to Rome. The first secret was depth. Modern builders, when they repair what remains of our work, are often shocked when they dig. They find not one layer, but many deeper than a man is tall. We called it the Ager. It was our fortress against time. We dug until we reached the solid earth, removing the soft soil that would shift with rain or frost. Then we began to fill it. Large stones at the bottom, smaller stones above, then gravel, sand, and finally the great basalt slabs on top, each one locked into place with perfect precision. Every layer had its purpose: drainage, strength, balance. Together, they became one body, breathing with the land yet never sinking into it. Aulus used to say that we were not building on the earth, we were building into it. That's why the roads endured. The earth accepted them instead of fighting against them. The second secret was slope. Every Roman road was built with a slight arch in the center, so that water would flow away to both sides. Even in the heaviest storms, the road remained dry. When you walked across it, you could feel the gentle curve beneath your feet, almost invisible but always there. To achieve that, we measured everything with the chorobates, a long wooden beam fitted with water channels and plumb lines. If the water inside the beam stood still, the road was level. If it tilted even slightly, we adjusted. It was tedious work, but the gods love precision. The third secret was the bond between the stones. You see, we used no mortar, no glue, no cement. The strength came from the way each stone embraced the next. Their edges were carved with such care that they fit together like the scales of a serpent. When carts rolled over them, the pressure only made them tighter, locking them together more firmly year after year. We built them to grow stronger under use, not weaker. It's strange, isn't it? That motion, the very thing that erodes mountains, could make something eternal. But the greatest secret was something no tool could measure. It was the discipline of the builders. Every man knew that his name would never be remembered, that his sweat would vanish into the dust. And yet he worked as if Jupiter himself were watching. We believed that the road was sacred, that it carried not just travelers, but the will of Rome. Each swing of the hammer, each lifted stone, was an act of devotion. Once, when we were building near the coast of Brundisium, a storm tore through the site. Tents ripped apart, fires drowned in the rain. At dawn, we found that a section of the half-built road had collapsed into the sea. I thought the work was lost, but Aulus simply stood there, rain dripping from his beard, and said, "Then we build again." And we did. We carved through rock until our hands bled, and when the sun rose the next day, the road was reborn. Stronger, straighter, and higher than before. That section still stands today. The sea crashes against it endlessly, but it never yields. Years later, when I passed by it again, I ran my hand along the stones. They were rough, weathered, but unbroken. Beneath them, I could still feel the heartbeat of the road, that faint vibration you can only sense if you've built one yourself. It was alive. Alive not because of magic, but because of purpose. Every stone was placed by a man who believed that he was touching eternity, even if only for a moment. So, when you walk on a Roman road, and you might, without even knowing it, remember this: what holds it together is not just rock and gravel. It is will. It is the stubbornness of men who refused to let the world forget their footsteps. That is why our roads have survived the centuries, because they were built not merely to be used, but to endure. And endurance, my friends, is the closest thing to immortality that mortals can ever hope to build. A road is never alone. Even the straightest, most perfectly laid stones are useless if there is no life around them. I learned that quickly, traveling along the Via Appia and other roads I helped construct. The road is a thread, but the people are the fabric that weaves its story. Every mile, every turn, every crossroads had its own pulse, its own voice. Near the first stretch outside Rome, I remember small clusters of inns and taverns, mansions as we called them, where weary travelers would rest and feed their animals. Carts rattled into these courtyards, spilling sacks of grain, wine, and olives. Soldiers dismounted to sharpen their swords or patch their leather armor. Sometimes wandering philosophers would stop, speaking softly to anyone who would listen about the nature of the gods or the meaning of life. I learned a great deal from overhearing such conversations, not always about philosophy, but about human nature itself. Along the road, temples rose at seemingly random intervals, small shrines dedicated to Mercury, the god of travelers, and Jupiter, protector of roads and journeys. Offerings were placed on their steps, coins, food, even tiny carved figurines. Some said the gods themselves walked along the stones at night, guiding lost travelers or punishing those who disrespected the road. I never saw a god, of course, but sometimes I could feel a presence, as if the road itself was watching. Marketplaces appeared at crossroads, turning a simple route into a bustling artery of trade. Merchants from Gaul brought wine and cloth. Traders from Hispania carried olive oil and pottery. Exotic goods from the east, spices, silk, glass beads, traveled slowly along the same stones I had laid, carried by men and women who risked bandits and storm alike. I remember one merchant, an older man with eyes like polished amber, who claimed that every road had a soul, and that a road that was treated with care would protect those who walked upon it. I laughed then, but I understood what he meant much later, when the same road carried my own army and my own fears across hills and rivers I had never seen before. Even the smallest villages owed their existence to the road. Where a straight path passed through wild fields, someone would build a home, then a bakery, then a blacksmith. Soon, the area hummed with life. I recall one village in particular, nestled between two hills and a river. Its children ran barefoot along the stones, their laughter echoing off the pavement. Fishermen carried their nets to market. Soldiers marched past in perfect alignment, and old women tended gardens along the edges. The road had given them order, purpose, a way to connect to the wider world. Yet, life along the road was not always peaceful. Bandits waited in the forests, eyes glinting like shadows, ready to snatch whatever they could. Rival merchants quarreled over tolls and goods. Storms would wash away makeshift bridges, flooding the surrounding fields and forcing us to rebuild quickly. Every challenge tested both the road and the people who depended on it. But the road endured, as did the settlements it carried. It was as though the stones themselves demanded that life continue, that commerce, travel, and stories persist no matter the hardship. I also witnessed the small miracles of human kindness. A soldier might share bread with a traveler who had none. A blacksmith would mend a broken wheel without charge, knowing that the road itself would repay him through continued traffic. Children would bring water to weary horses, laughing as they ran along the edges of the stones. All of these lives, all of these tiny actions, left marks on the road. Not visible marks, but echoes, faint traces in the way the stones seemed to carry the rhythm of human existence. Even nature took part. Birds nested in the gaps between paving stones. Grass sprouted along the edges, bending under the wind but never overtaking the path. In spring, the scent of wildflowers mingled with the dust of the road, reminding us that life and stone could coexist. I often stopped to watch deer grazing nearby or to listen to the distant roar of rivers, and I realized that the road was not separate from the world. It was woven into it, part of a larger, invisible tapestry. And so, life along the road thrived, grew, and changed with the seasons and centuries. Every day, the road carried not just goods and armies, but hopes, dreams, small tragedies, and tiny triumphs. It became a witness to the unfolding of history itself. When I walked those stretches as an old man, I could still feel it, the faint vibrations of life that had once rushed along its length. Even when the travelers were gone, even when the inns were abandoned, the road seemed to hum softly beneath my feet. It remembered every cart, every soldier, every whispered prayer, and every stolen coin. And in its memory, the empire lived on, long after men like me had faded into dust. No road, no matter how beautifully built, exists in isolation from the ambitions of men. I learned this early in my career, when the legions began to move along the stones we had laid. A road carries more than travelers and merchants. It carries armies, fear, hope, and sometimes death. And for Rome, the road was as much a weapon as a sword. I remember one autumn march vividly. I was 22, still learning the way of roads and men alike. A legion, nearly 6,000 strong, was ordered to move north to intercept a rebellion in the hills beyond Capua. The soldiers marched in perfect formation, their sandals striking the stone with a sound like distant thunder. The road beneath them, which we had labored over for months, bore their weight without complaint. It seemed to me then, and I still believe, that the road itself was part of the army, holding the line, guiding the march, ensuring that the men reached their destination in order. Roads were essential not only for speed but for survival. I have seen soldiers stranded in mud without a proper path, and I have seen them arrive swiftly along a straight road, spirits lifted, organized, unbroken. In those days, the difference between life and death could be measured in the smoothness of a single mile of stone. I remember carrying supplies along a narrow path through the Apennines where the old road had been washed away by rain. The wagons sank into mud, the oxen stumbled, and men slipped on the slick slopes. Then we redirected them along the newly built Via Appia, straight, wide, and firm. The relief in their eyes told me that our work was more than construction. It was salvation. Some roads became the stuff of legend, whispered in camps across the empire. There was a tale among soldiers that a section of road near the Rhine had saved an entire legion from ambush. The attackers had planned to strike while the men trudged through dense forest, but the engineers had built a raised causeway that allowed the legion to move swiftly and maintain their formation. By the time the enemy realized the mistake, the soldiers were already in position, ready to defend themselves. No one ever knew who the engineers were. We worked in silence, our names buried under the stones we laid, but the road remembered. And through that memory we achieved victory. The discipline of Roman soldiers complemented the discipline of the road itself. Each mile required attention to detail: ditches for drainage, watchposts for security, layers of stone set at precise angles. In times of war, scouts would inspect the route, checking for weaknesses that could be exploited by enemies. If a bridge was damaged or a surface cracked, repairs were swift and unrelenting. A gap in the road could cost lives. A well-maintained path could save thousands. There were nights when I walked alone along a newly completed road, lantern in hand, listening to the distant march of legions. I felt a strange connection, as if the stones were alive with the rhythm of disciplined feet. The road carried the weight of armor and weapons, of pride and fear, of orders whispered and shouted alike. I could sense the tension, the anticipation of conflict, and the quiet resolve of men who trusted the stones beneath them more than the uncertain ground of the wilderness. And yet, not all stories of roads in war are of triumph. I have seen roads abandoned in panic, sections crumbling under siege, villages burned along their edges. I have seen soldiers lost in rain-slick valleys because no road led them safely through. The contrast made the roads we built all the more precious. They were not merely paths, they were lifelines. In my years as an engineer, I came to understand that the road itself teaches patience and strategy. A commander who respects it gains advantage. One who ignores it invites disaster. The smooth surface, the proper gradient, the hidden ditches for drainage, all are lessons in foresight and care. A road that stands becomes an extension of the mind that built it. It holds not only armies but their plans, their discipline, and their destiny. I have walked many such paths through forests, across rivers, over mountains. I have seen them bear the weight of countless souls, their stones singing silently beneath the boots of men who will never know who laid them. And I have realized, in the quiet of dawn or the hush of night, that the road remembers. It remembers the march, the clash of shields, the whispered prayers, the strategies enacted in perfect rhythm along its unyielding spine. It is alive in a way that few can see. But any soldier who has walked it knows, instinctively, its strength, its wisdom, and its patience. For the Roman Empire, the road was a weapon, a shield, and a guide. It carried life and death alike, shaping the outcome of battles and the fate of entire provinces. And through it all, we, the builders, the engineers, the unseen hands, left our mark, silent but eternal, in the very bones of Rome itself. A road is never just a road. To the people who built it, it is stone and sweat, sun and labor. To an emperor, it is power, a means of shaping an empire, bending the world to his will. I learned this when I first traveled with a governor assigned to oversee the construction of roads in Etruria. It was the first time I truly understood how stone could hold authority as firmly as any sword. The emperor, or his appointed magistrates, treated the roads as arteries connecting the heart of Rome to every limb of the empire. Without them, provinces were isolated, governors powerless, legions delayed, and taxes lost. With them, the emperor could move quickly, enforce laws, deliver justice, and display his presence across hundreds of miles. I remember a particular assignment, building a road from Ariminum to Ravenna. The terrain was treacherous, with marshes and hills, rivers to cross, and forests that seemed endless. Yet every decision, every stone laid, was influenced by strategy. This was not mere engineering. This was governance made tangible. I often accompanied officials as they inspected our work. They would ride in ornate carriages, cloaked and adorned, while I walked behind, dusty and calloused. To them, the road was a tool, a symbol of order. A province with good roads was a province under control. A province with broken paths was a province slipping toward chaos. I realized then that our labor, unnoticed and silent, was the backbone of imperial power. The roads allowed messages to move with astonishing speed. A decree from the emperor could reach the farthest village in days, carried by mounted couriers racing along the stones we laid. Soldiers could be dispatched to trouble spots without delay. Merchants could transport goods swiftly, enriching both the state and themselves. Even spies and diplomats relied on our work, traveling incognito along quiet paths that connected cities otherwise separated by forests, rivers, or mountains. I once observed a governor send word to Rome via a courier who crossed nearly 200 miles in a single day, the road beneath him firm and unyielding, ensuring that the message arrived before nightfall. Along these routes, bridges were erected with care as if they were temples. I helped build one over the Tiber, its arches precise and unyielding, carved from travertine and supported by layers of concrete so strong that even centuries later, it would still bear the weight of travelers. I remember watching officials cross it, their robes fluttering, their faces proud. Little did they know that beneath their feet, the stones held not only their steps but the sweat and devotion of hundreds of laborers who had given everything to ensure this path endured. The emperor's roads also carried prestige. Cities connected by a straight, well-paved route prospered. They drew traders, travelers, artisans, and scholars. A single road could transform a village into a thriving town. Governors competed to extend roads through their regions, each hoping to leave their mark on the empire's landscape. I sometimes wondered if the emperor ever noticed us, the unseen hands who made the splendor possible. Perhaps he did in fleeting moments. Perhaps he merely trusted that the stones would do what men could not, hold Rome together. And yet, power traveled along roads as quietly as it did loudly. Assassins, rebels, even fugitives used the same paths. I saw soldiers rush to intercept bandits who had fled along a newly completed section, chasing shadows across the countryside. I heard tales of spies carrying secrets in hollowed walking sticks, slipping unseen through villages while the merchants and governors moved confidently along the same stone. Every mile of road held stories of intrigue, diplomacy, and hidden danger, invisible layers beneath the smooth surface. I often walked these paths at dawn, alone, when mist hugged the earth. The emperor's banners were absent, the soldiers gone, the merchants still asleep. And yet, the road seemed to hum with authority. It demanded respect, obedience, attention. It carried centuries of power in every stone, every carefully measured angle, every hidden layer of gravel and concrete. And as I traced my hand along its worn edges, I understood the truth. The emperor rules only as long as the road allows him to move, to communicate, to act. Without it, He is nothing more than a figure in a palace, removed from the lives he seeks to control. That realization stayed with me for decades. I built roads for Rome not only because it was my duty, but because I understood that every stone I laid extended the reach of governance, shaped the lives of countless men and women, and immortalized an empire in earth and rock. And so, the Emperor's Path, a road, a tool, a symbol, stretched endlessly across the land, straight and unwavering, a silent testament to the vision and authority of those who dared to command the world. The road is never silent. It carries not only armies and officials, but also the endless stream of lives passing through. Traders with carts creaking under their loads, pilgrims murmuring prayers, wanderers with nothing but the clothes on their backs, and travelers whose stories vanish into memory as soon as they arrive. I learned to read the road like a living thing, noticing the subtle shifts that signaled the passage of different travelers, each leaving behind traces that few could see. I remember one spring morning along the Via Flaminia, when the sun was just tipping the horizon and casting long shadows across the stones. A caravan of merchants emerged from the forest, laden with jars of wine, baskets of dried figs, and bolts of cloth dyed in deep reds and blues. Their oxen snorted, stamping on the dust, while the younger boys ran alongside, laughing and shouting. I paused my work and watched them for a moment. The road beneath them was firm, yet it seemed to hum with the weight of their journey. It carried them swiftly, smoothly, safely, and in doing so, it carried the hopes of every hand that had touched the merchandise, the prayers of mothers seeing their children off, the whispered deals of traders making their fortunes. Later that day, a group of pilgrims passed, barefoot and slow, each step measured and heavy with devotion. They left offerings at small shrines along the roadside, coins, little carvings, flowers pressed into cracks between the stones. Some carried scrolls of sacred texts, others sang quietly to keep the pace. The road guided them, unyielding and patient, from one town to the next, from one sacred site to another. I could almost feel their faith pressing into the stones, leaving invisible marks that no flood or fire could erase. It was not only the grand or the devout who traveled. I met wandering minstrels who sang tales of kings and heroes, their voices carrying over the stones, echoing in the valleys. Farmers walked with goats and sheep, merchants with donkeys carrying jars of honey, and children ran along the edges, kicking pebbles and laughing. Every mile was alive with life, and every life became part of the road itself, like a river carving the landscape over centuries. I also saw chance encounters that changed destinies. One afternoon near Ariminum, a soldier escorting a caravan collided with a young merchant boy from Hispania. Both fell into the dust, anger flashing, but within hours they were laughing and sharing food. Years later, the merchant would become a supplier to the legions, the soldier a commander in a distant province, and all because of a single crossing on the road. I often reflected that the road is a kind of fate. It brings people together, separates them, and carries their lives forward whether they are aware or not. Sometimes the road even carried messages of love. A young woman would travel to a neighboring town to deliver a letter to her betrothed. Two strangers might meet at a small inn by the roadside, sharing a meal, a story, a stolen moment, before continuing on their separate paths. I have seen marriages begin along the stones I had laid, children born in villages that grew because of the travelers I watched pass. The road does not merely move goods or armies. It moves hearts. The road also carries the mundane, the ordinary details that escape history books but define life. Carts spilling grain, oxen slipping on wet stones, a lost child reunited with a parent, a pack of dogs chasing rabbits along the ditches. All of these moments passed unnoticed by the Empire, yet they left a subtle rhythm that the road remembered. I have walked these paths alone at night, listening to the whisper of wind through the pines, the distant murmur of travelers' voices, and I felt the invisible network of lives flowing across the stones. Even strangers brought stories. A merchant from Gaul might speak of wine prices in faraway towns. A soldier might tell of a skirmish at the Danube. A philosopher might muse on the nature of time itself. I collected these fragments like treasures, storing them in my memory as the road carried them onward. It was as if every story, every voice, every footstep became part of the road, layering history beneath our feet. And so, life along the road was rich and unceasing. It was chaos and order intertwined, each traveler a note in a symphony, each mile a measure of time. The road did not discriminate between the mighty and the meek, the devout and the rogue. It carried all, and in carrying them, it preserved them, and perhaps, in some small way, preserved me. Every road has its stories, but Roman roads carried legends like invisible cargo, whispered from traveler to traveler, inscribed not in stone but in memory. I first heard them while repairing a section near the hills of Latium, where mist draped the valleys like silver cloth. The villagers spoke of ghosts that walked the road at midnight, silent figures draped in togas, their sandals clicking softly, vanishing when approached. No one dared linger, yet the roads themselves remained untouched, as if the spirits were guardians, ensuring travelers respected the path. One tale told of a soldier who vanished on the Via Salaria. He had been sent to deliver a critical message to Rome during a skirmish on the frontier. Midway, a thick fog swallowed him, and for 3 nights villagers saw a lone figure pacing the stones, holding a lantern that never flickered. Some claimed he carried the emperor's orders even in death, walking endlessly to complete his duty. I walked that stretch many times, lantern in hand, and though I saw nothing, I could feel the echo of his steps vibrating faintly beneath my feet. The road remembers, they said, even those who vanish. Other legends were less frightening but equally persistent. Merchants whispered that coins left in the cracks between paving stones would bring good fortune, or that a broken wheel repaired along the road at the right hour could prevent misfortune for an entire caravan. I have seen travelers leave small offerings, carved animals, strings of beads, scraps of cloth, each one a charm against accidents, bandits, or the wrath of the gods. The stones absorbed them quietly, storing luck and warnings alike, waiting for the next passerby to unknowingly receive their blessing. There were even tales of hidden messages. Some claimed that the distance markers, those simple stones etched with numbers, held secret codes for spies or rebels. A glance at a particular milestone might direct a messenger to a hidden cache, or warn a soldier of danger ahead. I can neither confirm nor deny these stories, but I know the roads were watched. The empire relied on them, and every mile was scrutinized, measured, and sometimes exploited. The stones, in their silent patience, carried not only travelers but secrets, invisible yet persistent. Legends also entwined with the natural world. Rivers crossing the roads were said to speak in the wind, whispering warnings to those who traveled too fast or with too much arrogance. Cypress trees lining the stones were called the eyes of the road, alert to trespassers, collapsing under the weight of evil or negligence. Even the animals, foxes, deer, birds, were thought to guide or mislead travelers depending on the purity of their intentions. I often smiled at these beliefs, yet I admit that walking alone along a foggy path at dawn, I sometimes imagined the stones themselves had consciousness. They seemed to pulse with memory and expectation, urging respect, caution, and care. The most persistent legend, however, was of the eternal traveler. It was said that any man who laid stones with perfect dedication, who measured and placed each block with patience, could leave a fragment of his spirit in the road. That fragment would live on, unseen, guiding future travelers, protecting them from error or harm. I laughed at this as a young man, but as I aged, I understood its truth in a different way. Every stone I placed, every road I helped build, carried traces of my work, my sweat, my intentions. The roads became my voice in eternity, my presence traveling far beyond the limits of flesh. Even the mundane gained a kind of magic. A merchant crossing a sun-baked plain, a soldier marching in formation, a child running along the roadside, all contributed to the rhythm and spirit of the path. Stories intertwined, lives overlapped, and the road grew richer for it. In centuries yet to come, travelers might speak of these same stones, unaware that they carried the weight of my footsteps, my thoughts, my silent prayers for their safety. And so, the legends endured alongside the reality. They reminded people that the road was more than mere stones and gravel. It was alive with memory, infused with care, fear, hope, and the invisible threads of human effort. Even now, when I walk along the older stretches, I sense it, a quiet vibration, a hum beneath my sandals. It is the story of countless lives and countless stones, intertwined, unyielding, eternal. The empire stretched far beyond the familiar hills of Rome, and with it, our work carried us into lands as foreign as dreams. I traveled with a small team of engineers and laborers, each of us tasked with extending the empire's veins, roads, into distant provinces where the stones we laid would become lifelines of culture, commerce, and control. It was here, in these unfamiliar lands, that I learned the road was more than engineering. It was diplomacy, patience, and survival rolled into one unyielding path. In Gaul, we contended with terrain both beautiful and cruel. Rolling fields, dense forests, rivers swollen by spring rains. Nature challenged us at every turn. We dug trenches to drain waterlogged valleys, carved embankments through thick undergrowth, and used massive logs to reinforce muddy sections. Local villagers watched cautiously, some helping, some suspicious, wondering why Romans demanded straight lines in lands that curved with rivers and hills. They called us magicians or madmen, depending on the day. I tried to explain our methods, showing how layers of stones and gravel, carefully aligned, would endure floods and frost. Some understood, others only watched, shaking their heads as if we were tampering with the earth's secrets. In Hispania, the sun baked the earth until it cracked like pottery. We laid stones over hills that seemed endless, marching in the heat while locals offered water and shade. They taught us to listen to the land, when the soil was too soft, when the stones needed extra bedding, when a river might flood unexpectedly. I learned to read the signs, the angle of the slope, the smell of damp earth, the call of birds signaling hidden streams. Each mile required negotiation with the land itself, and sometimes with people whose ways differed from our own. In the provinces, the road was a teacher. It taught patience to the impatient, humility to the proud, and vigilance to the overconfident. I remember a particular stretch in Germania, where winter arrived with sudden frost and snow. We built bridges of timber reinforced with stone, laying the path across frozen rivers that could crack under a careless step. The locals spoke of spirits that haunted the forests, of wolves that prowled under moonlight, of roads that cursed men who disrespected them. We laughed at the stories during the day, but at night, listening to the wind moan through the trees, I understood their fear. A road is nothing without respect, for the land, for its people, and for the travelers who rely upon it. Each province brought new customs and challenges. In Britannia, we found villages built on mounds, surrounded by marshes. Our road cut straight through, requiring ditches, embankments, and corduroy logs beneath the stone to prevent sinking. The locals were curious, some fearful, some fascinated. Trade began almost immediately: pottery, wool, iron, and suddenly, A road was not just a path but a bridge between cultures. The stones we laid carried merchants, soldiers, envoys, and travelers of every sort. They carried the empire's reach, but also ideas, goods, and stories from distant lands. Even in Africa, along the edges of deserts, the road became a lifeline. We laid stone slabs over sand that shifted with every wind, carving embankments and drainage channels to protect against sudden rains that could wash miles of work away. Caravans of camels followed, and we watched as traders moved goods of incense, gold, and grain along the path we had labored over. The desert was merciless, yet the road endured, carrying life across a place that otherwise would have been inhospitable. The beauty of working in the provinces was witnessing how the road united diverse people. A merchant from Gaul could meet a trader from Hispania, a soldier from Rome, and a shepherd from Germania, all on the same stones, moving toward the same destinations, exchanging not just goods but ideas, stories, and customs. I saw friendships form, families begin journeys together, and even rivalries ease because the road demanded cooperation. It was as though the stones themselves enforced a kind of peace, a silent law that all who traveled must respect the path and, by extension, each other. And through it all, I understood that our work was more than construction. We were creating connections, weaving an invisible network of culture, commerce, and control. The stones carried more than weight. They carried the essence of an empire and the lives of those who dwelled within it. Long after the men who laid them were gone, long after the governors and generals departed, the roads remained, straight, patient, unyielding, connecting distant provinces in ways that no map or decree could fully capture. No road is built without hardship. I learned this truth not in the comfortable hills near Rome, but in the far reaches of the empire, where nature and man alike tested every stone we laid. Bitter winds, torrential rains, and sudden floods were constant companions, as were the hidden dangers that no plan could foresee. I recall one autumn in Pannonia, when the sky opened and rain fell in sheets, turning trenches into rivers and hillsides into mudslides. Our laborers slipped and sank, carts overturned, spilling timber and tools. We worked in silence, save for the rush of water and the occasional shout as someone struggled to regain footing. Yet the stones had to be placed perfectly, or the road would fail. Each layer of gravel, each slab of basalt, had to endure not just the weather but the weight of generations to come. Bandits were another challenge. They knew the value of the roads, and they preyed on travelers who relied upon them. One evening near the forests of Dalmatia, a small caravan we were escorting was ambushed. Torches glimmered between the trees, horses panicked, and swords clashed. We fought to protect the goods and the people, all while ensuring the road remained intact. The stones beneath our feet were a lifeline. If they gave way, we would be trapped. I remember feeling the vibration of the cobblestones under the horses' hooves, sensing their strength and how vital they were to survival. In that moment, the road was more than stone. It was a shield, a foundation of safety amidst chaos. Illness haunted us as much as any enemy. Typhus, fevers, and dysentery swept through labor camps with terrifying speed. Men I had known for months could vanish overnight, leaving the work to continue without pause. We learned to carry water carefully, to cook in the open air, and to build shelters that could protect against the damp and cold. Yet even in sickness, the work continued. The road demanded patience, endurance, and unwavering commitment. I often thought that it was in these moments, when we were weakest, that the stones took on our determination, absorbing our sweat and spirit, holding it fast for centuries yet to come. Earthquakes and landslides added another layer of danger. One spring, while extending a road through the Apennines, the mountains groaned and a section collapsed. Rocks tumbled into newly dug trenches, crushing tools and flattening half our labor camp. We dug through rubble, rebuilt embankments, and reinforced the foundations with even greater care. It was exhausting work, and many whispered that the gods tested us. I do not know if they did, but I understood that only perseverance and precision could conquer the unpredictable forces of nature. Even simple mistakes carried consequences. A poorly cut stone, an improperly aligned drainage ditch, or a misjudged slope could cost lives and money. I recall one incident in Hispania, when a section of road had been hastily paved to meet a governor's deadline. Within months, the rains had washed away the base layers, leaving travelers stuck in mud and oxen sinking up to their knees. We had to start again, digging deeper, measuring with meticulous care, and reinforcing each layer until it could survive storms and centuries alike. From that day, I understood that the road demands respect, not haste. Yet these trials shaped us as builders. They forged discipline, patience, and ingenuity. I saw men who once grumbled and shirked labor become steadfast, learning to read the land, anticipate dangers, and work as one body. We learned to balance speed with care, strength with subtlety, determination with humility. And in doing so, we created not just roads, but legacies. It is no exaggeration to say that every stone I placed carries these trials within it. The sweat, the fear, the endurance, and the triumphs. Centuries later, a traveler treading upon them would never know the storms we endured, the diseases we battled, the bandits we fought, or the mountains we carved. Yet it is there, beneath their feet, quiet and unbroken, a testament to the resilience of men and the permanence of their labor. The road teaches endurance not only to travelers but to its builders. It does not forget. It does not forgive. It remembers every hardship, every misstep, every victory, and through that memory, it stands eternal. A road is more than stones laid in a straight line. It is the art of overcoming obstacles. Rivers, valleys, marshes, and cliffs interrupted the path, and it fell to engineers like me to tame them, to make them passable, reliable, and enduring. It was on these stretches that the genius of Roman engineering truly shone, where the road became not merely functional, but magnificent. I remember the first bridge I helped construct, spanning the Tiber near Rome. Its arches were simple yet elegant, rising gracefully from the water, perfectly balanced, each stone cut and placed with care that seemed almost ceremonial. The river beneath could rage in spring or dwindle in summer, but the bridge endured. I walked across it countless times, marveling at how the stones seemed to float above the current, carrying merchants, soldiers, and citizens alike without complaint. It was then I realized that every arch, every keystone, every layer of concrete beneath the visible surface was a story of foresight and patience, of men working in harmony with nature rather than against it. Further afield, in Gaul, we encountered wide rivers that demanded bridges longer and stronger than any we had built before. We used timber scaffolds, carefully aligned stone piers, and arches that could support not just carts and horses but entire legions on the march. I recall the sound of soldiers' feet echoing under the arches for the first time, a vibration through the stones that made the bridge feel alive, almost aware. It was a hum of life and purpose, a testament to the empire's determination to bind its provinces together with paths that were as enduring as the ideals they carried. Accompanying these roads were other marvels, aqueducts and drainage systems that ensured that water neither undermined the stone nor turned the road into mud. I worked on aqueducts alongside highways, marveling at how water could travel for miles, maintaining a gentle slope so precise that it defied common sense, all while remaining strong enough to survive storms and floods. Villages and towns that had once struggled for drinkable water suddenly flourished, their fountains and baths fed by channels that ran above or beneath the same roads we had labored over. The stones of the road and the channels of the aqueduct became partners, both serving life, commerce, and civilization with equal devotion. Masonry techniques fascinated travelers and locals alike. We cut stones to fit so perfectly that mortar seemed almost unnecessary, each one locking into the next in a silent symphony of engineering. I have watched children run along arches and bridges, marveling at their elegance, unaware that every curve and every weight distribution had been calculated decades before. Even emperors paused to admire them, though I doubt they grasped the centuries of labor and ingenuity they symbolized. The roads and bridges also held symbolic power. A traveler crossing a vast river on a solid stone bridge felt safety, confidence, and order. The empire was tangible beneath their feet. Even when armies advanced into hostile lands, when merchants journeyed through unknown territories, when messages had to reach the farthest provinces, the bridges ensured continuity, reliability, and reassurance. They were more than structures. They were promises of Rome itself. Some of the most impressive feats were in remote provinces, where engineers had to invent solutions for challenges unseen before. In Hispania, we built a bridge across a canyon, combining timber and stone, using ropes and pulleys to raise massive blocks into place. I remember working alongside local masons, learning their techniques, merging them with Roman precision, and marveling at how different cultures could contribute to the permanence of a single path. The road, in these moments, became a bridge not only across rivers but across knowledge, skill, and imagination. Even nature seemed to respect these works. Floods would rage and recede, storms would batter the timber scaffolds, yet the bridges and aqueducts survived, as if the stones themselves absorbed the fury and redistributed it evenly, silently enduring centuries of weather and time. Travelers often paused to admire the views, unaware of the precision beneath their feet, the hidden layers of engineering that ensured their safety. I smiled at their amazement, knowing that the true marvel was in the invisible labor, the meticulous placement of every stone, the careful alignment, the silent calculations that held all of it together. And so, the roads were not merely routes, but lifelines, corridors of commerce, communication, and civilization. Bridges, aqueducts, embankments, each element a testament to human ingenuity and endurance. They carried life across rivers and valleys, over marshes and cliffs, connecting people, ideas, and cultures in ways that words alone could not achieve. Walking along one of these roads, I often felt a quiet pride, knowing that centuries later, travelers would tread the same stones, unaware that the spirit of those who built them still lingered in every arch, every slab, and every carefully laid foundation. Roads are more than stone and labor. They are arteries through which the lifeblood of an empire flows. I saw this clearly as trade flourished along the paths we built, connecting Rome to distant provinces, cities, and villages. Goods traveled over our roads in endless streams. Jars of olive oil, amphorae of wine, bolts of fine cloth, bundles of herbs and spices, metals mined in faraway hills, and sometimes even treasures that kings would envy. I recall one journey along the Via Emilia, where a caravan from the northern provinces had brought amber from the forests of Germania. It gleamed in the sunlight, caught in baskets lined with straw, each piece polished and warm to the touch. Merchants haggled, travelers marveled, and soldiers ensured the path remained secure. I watched as a young boy, accompanying his father's wagon, pointed at the amber and whispered to me, asking if it was truly gold. I smiled and said, "Not gold, but valuable enough to move armies and merchants alike." The boy's eyes widened, and I realized that even the smallest traveler could sense the road's power to carry fortune. Trade was not merely about goods. It was about stories, skills, and ideas. A weaver from Gaul would meet a dyer from Hispania and exchange techniques, patterns, and colors. A potter from Africa would meet a merchant from Britannia and learn of new markets and materials. All of this happened because the roads allowed people to meet, converse, and collaborate. The stones beneath our feet became conduits of innovation and connection, silent yet essential. Some goods were rare, almost legendary. Silks from the Far East passed through Roman hands, traveling through provinces and over roads we had labored on for months, their colors bright and patterns intricate. Spices from distant deserts arrived in small jars, their aroma enticing traders and nobles alike. Even fragile items, glass, fine pottery, manuscripts, made the journey, carefully packed, surviving miles of stone, mud, and river crossings. I often marveled at how the road seemed to protect these treasures, keeping them safe through storms, bandits, and accidents. The road also changed destinies. I met a young merchant in Hispania whose family was struggling to survive. Through the road, he traveled to Rome, sold his wares, learned new methods of trade, and returned to his village wealthy and respected. I saw soldiers rise through the ranks because they arrived quickly at critical locations. I observed farmers thrive as their crops could reach distant markets before spoilage. Every stone we laid had the potential to transform lives, quietly and invisibly. Even local customs intertwined with trade along the road. In Gaul, festivals coincided with caravan arrivals, and villagers would celebrate the passing of goods with music, dance, and feasts. In Britannia, travelers shared stories of distant lands, legends, and myths with those they met along the way. The road became a stage for life, commerce, and culture. A continuous journey where every traveler played a part, knowingly or not. Of course, not every journey was smooth. Storms washed away parts of the path, bandits struck at lonely wagons, and miscalculations in supply could ruin an entire caravan. Yet the road endured, repaired and reinforced by the hands of men who knew that trade depended on it. I worked alongside merchants, soldiers, and villagers alike, understanding that a mile of well-laid stone could change fortunes more reliably than any decree from Rome. And through it all, I recognized a larger pattern. The road carried not just goods, not just wealth, but ideas, knowledge, and culture. A Roman engineer like me could see it clearly. Commerce intertwined with diplomacy, movement intertwined with learning, and every stone we laid ensured that the empire thrived not by force alone, but by connection. The road, silent and unassuming, became the engine of civilization. It was as alive as any marketplace or forum, humming with the footsteps of countless travelers, each contributing to the rhythm of an empire that stretched farther than one mind could imagine. The road is impartial. It does not favor kings over peasants, merchants over soldiers, or priests over wanderers. Yet, through its impartiality, it creates intersections where lives collide, destinies shift, and stories unfold that no historian could ever fully capture. I witnessed these moments countless times, each one a thread woven into the tapestry of the empire. One day along the Via Appia, I encountered a young soldier escorting a merchant caravan. The boy had just been promoted, proud but nervous, and he struggled to keep pace with the experienced men around him. A sudden rockslide forced the caravan to halt, and the soldier, panicked, nearly abandoned his post. I stepped in, guiding him to safety, and in that instant he learned discipline, courage, and trust. Months later, he would command a unit in the northern provinces, recalling the road that had shaped his character in ways no drill could. Sometimes, encounters were stranger and more unpredictable. I remember a wandering poet from Hispania who insisted on traveling on foot, reciting verses at every village and in along the road. People laughed, scoffed, and occasionally listened, but in each town, he left whispers of stories, snippets of songs, and a lingering sense of wonder. I walked alongside him for a stretch, listening to his tales of gods, heroes, and distant lands. Though he carried nothing of value in the material sense, His presence transformed the journey for everyone who met him, proving that the road transported not only goods but inspiration. Romance found its way along the stones as well. A pair of travelers met one spring morning at a riverside rest stop, their carts crossing paths by chance. They shared a meal, stories, and laughter, and by nightfall, they had agreed to journey together. I watched them depart at dawn, hands intertwined, and I thought about how a straight line of stones could weave hearts together just as reliably as it carried armies and merchants. Years later, they would speak of the road as their meeting place, a symbol of fate and endurance. Danger and misfortune were equally intertwined with the road. A caravan carrying precious metals was ambushed near a dense forest in Gaul, leaving travelers stranded and terrified. I helped rebuild the path, reinforce the bridges, and guide survivors to safety. The bandits were caught weeks later, but the memory of fear lingered among the travelers. Even so, the road remained, unchanging, impartial, silent, carrying all, danger, fortune, joy, and sorrow alike. I also witnessed moments of absurdity. A pair of merchants quarreled over the weight of a crate of figs, arguing until they tipped the entire load into a ditch. Dogs chased chickens across the road, causing a temporary chaos that left oxen braying and villagers laughing. These small, chaotic episodes reminded me that while the road was monumental, it also hosted the ordinary, the humorous, and the trivial moments that make life unpredictable. The road carried messages, sometimes life-changing. I once transported a letter from a governor warning of a rebellion in a distant province. The courier racing along the stones arrived just in time to avert a massacre. I walked behind him, dust rising from his hooves, heart pounding, realizing that the road had been both messenger and savior. It was silent, yet it had shaped the course of events, as effectively as any army or decree. And so, I came to understand the full magnitude of what we were building. The stones did not merely endure the weight of carts and travelers. They bore the weight of lives, decisions, chance, and destiny. Every mile was a crucible where courage, folly, love, greed, and ingenuity met, leaving traces that centuries could not erase. Walking along the road, I could feel the invisible threads connecting past, present, and future. Threads of lives changed, stories created, and destinies intertwined. The road is impartial, yes, but it is also alive with consequence. It listens, remembers, and moves the world, one stone at a time. And for those of us who build it, it carries the quiet knowledge that our labor endures not only in material but in the countless lives it touches, guiding travelers in ways we may never fully understand. Nightfall changes everything. The same stones that feel steady and familiar by day take on a different character under the moon and stars. I learned early that the road at night has its own life, subtle, secret, and often unsettling. Shadows stretch and twist, wind whispers through trees and ruins, and every creak of a cart or crack of a branch carries more weight than in daylight. I remember a journey along the Via Flaminia under a crescent moon. A lone traveler approached, wrapped in a cloak too thin for the chill, carrying nothing but a small satchel and a staff. He nodded politely as he passed, his footsteps barely audible over the gravel. For hours, I kept him in sight, curious about who he was and why he traveled alone at such an hour. By dawn, he vanished into the mists of a valley, leaving no trace but the faint echo of his footsteps. I have thought of him often, imagining where the road carried him, what stories he gathered along the way, and how the stones bore witness to his passage. Night also brought danger. Bandits preferred the cover of darkness, striking when visibility was low and travelers were weary. I remember escorting a caravan near the hills of Apulia, lanterns flickering in the wind, when we spotted figures moving silently among the trees. We had to react quickly, forming a protective line, torches casting long shadows over the stones. The confrontation was brief, chaotic, and frightening, but the road held firm beneath our feet. It carried us safely past, as if aware of the stakes and willing us onward. But there were moments of quiet wonder as well. Stars reflected on the worn stones, creating a silver path that seemed endless, stretching beyond imagination. I often paused, listening to the night. Owls calling, distant wolves howling, the occasional creak of a tree bending in the wind. The road seemed alive in these moments, vibrating with the memory of all who had passed before. I imagined that travelers from centuries prior, long gone, walked alongside me invisibly, their footsteps echoing faintly in rhythm with mine. Some nights carried more mysterious occurrences. I heard whispers that were not there, shadows that seemed to move independently, and faint lights dancing along stretches of deserted road. Villagers claimed these were spirits of lost travelers, or perhaps the guardians of the stones, ensuring no harm would come to those who respected the path. I cannot say what they were, but I know that the road at night demanded respect. It was not simply stone and gravel. It was memory, presence, and perhaps something beyond comprehension. I once stumbled upon a small inn, nestled against a bend in the road where travelers often paused. Inside, a mix of merchants, soldiers, and wandering minstrels gathered, sharing food, stories, and songs. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and for a while, the road became a living theater. Journeys paused, but the stones outside held the weight of every traveler who had passed, quietly waiting to resume their eternal duty come morning. The night also forced introspection. Walking alone along miles of quiet stones, I thought of the empire, of the people whose lives intersected with the road, of my own place in the grand design. I realized that every step I took, every stone I placed, was part of something far greater than myself. The road was a bridge across time, carrying memories and futures alike, indifferent yet profoundly consequential. Sometimes the road at night revealed subtle signs, a bent branch indicating a hidden path, a scratch in a stone marking a previous traveler's presence, faint carvings that told stories or delivered warnings. I began to notice them, leaving my own marks for those who might follow, adding to the silent dialogue of countless generations. The road became not just a route, but a living archive, a guide for those who could read its subtle language. And so, nightfall did not frighten me. It taught me. It taught me patience, awareness, reverence, and humility. The road whispered its secrets to those willing to listen, and in return, it carried us safely through darkness, to dawn, and to the continuing journey that awaited with every sunrise. The road never sleeps, though its travelers change with the hours and seasons. By day, it teems with merchants, soldiers, messengers, and wanderers. By night, it hosts the solitary, the watchful, and sometimes the desperate. Each traveler has a rhythm, a story, and a purpose, and every type of carriage, cart, or wagon adds its own character to the stones beneath. I remember observing a merchant convoy along the Via Claudia. Their wagons were heavy, wheels reinforced with iron rims, carrying barrels of wine, bundles of grain, and finely woven cloth. The horses' hooves clattered on the cobblestones, creating a steady percussion that echoed through the valleys. Drivers shouted to keep pace, adjusted harnesses, and repaired broken wheels on the go. I marveled at the precision. One misaligned wheel could ruin the path, damage the goods, and delay trade for days. Yet the road absorbed it all, carrying their weight patiently, as if aware of the empire's reliance on such journeys. Then there were the solitary travelers, moving quietly on foot or horseback, a scholar journeying to study the scrolls in Rome, a young bride fleeing a distant village, a messenger carrying urgent news across provinces. All shared the same stones, each step leaving a faint echo of life. I walked alongside them sometimes, exchanging greetings or helping when weather or terrain proved treacherous. I realized that the road witnessed both the monumental and the intimate, armies and merchants, love and learning, fear and hope, all moving in tandem yet unaware of one another's presence. Carriages themselves were as varied as their travelers. Heavy merchant wagons lumbered slowly, demanding reinforced surfaces and occasional repairs. Light carts carried delicate goods, requiring careful navigation around stones and potholes. Military carriages moved with urgency, sometimes at night, requiring vigilance and precision, especially in territories prone to banditry. Even ceremonial processions, adorned with banners and escorted by soldiers, used the roads to impress subjects and intimidate enemies, transforming mere stones into instruments of power and prestige. The habits of travelers also shaped the road's life. Merchants stopped at inns and way stations, leaving traces of trade, conversations, and laughter. Soldiers marched in formation, drums beating a rhythm that vibrated through the stones, instilling a sense of order and discipline. Pilgrims paused to pray at roadside shrines, leaving offerings and marking their devotion. I began to notice that the road adapted subtly. Ruts formed where wagons passed repeatedly, patches of gravel reinforced frequently traveled sections, and way stations grew around natural resting points. It was a living system, shaped by human activity yet enduring far beyond the individuals who contributed to it. I once followed a group of traders carrying exotic goods from the east: silk, spices, and gems. They moved cautiously, aware of bandits and treacherous terrain. I watched as they debated the best route, repaired a broken wheel, and carefully balanced crates of delicate cargo. The stones held firm beneath them, a silent partner in their commerce, proving time and again that a well-laid road could bear the weight of civilization itself. Even small, seemingly insignificant travelers added to the road's story. Children running errands, shepherds moving flocks, and wandering entertainers each left traces, sometimes fleeting, sometimes lasting. I recall a troupe of minstrels traveling through a forested stretch of road, singing songs that echoed against the hills. For a moment, the path became alive with music, laughter, and the rhythm of life, as if the stones themselves vibrated with joy. Through these countless journeys, I realized that the road was more than a construction project. It was a living entity, responding to the weight, pace, and habits of those who used it. It endured because travelers respected it, because laborers maintained it, and because every stone had been placed with care, foresight, and dedication. The road did not distinguish between kings and beggars, scholars and soldiers, merchants and wanderers. It carried them all, impartially yet faithfully, weaving a complex tapestry of life, movement, and connection that stretched across the empire. And in observing these travelers, I understood the full measure of our work. Every mile of stone, every carefully placed arch, every repaired rut was not just a path but a stage for life itself, a conduit for ambition, survival, and human endeavor that would outlast all who trod it.